Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. We're going to get to our main topic in just a moment, which is going to be the Packers' practice habits and why they need to improve. Before we get there, we've got some news and notes as we usually do. First up, per Rob Demovsky of ESPN, he reports that Jerry Gray is no longer under contract with the Green Bay Packers, which makes him a free agent. He mentions that that doesn't necessarily mean he won't be back, but he is free to sign with any team, and he doesn't need a promotion to go to another team. So while the Falcons are interviewing him for their defensive coordinator spot, the Bears are interested in him for some unknown defensive spot. He could go to another team with just a secondary spot, or really any position, or any position coach, any job, period. So he is a full-fledged free agent and can go with any team at this point, which is noteworthy. With that being said, I've kind of said all year long, I know there's this sort of pedestal for Jerry Gray, and he very well may be a great coach. It's tough to tell like which position coaches are really good, which aren't, etc. But I'll say this. This is a team that had veteran defensive backs littered throughout their defensive backfield. You've had Savage and Amos who have played together, Jair Alexander, Rasul Douglas, Eric Stokes, like really good defensive backs, and they had trouble communicating with each other all year long. That's coaching to me. And I'm not saying Jerry Gray necessarily did anything wrong. Maybe he did everything perfectly and the guys just didn't get it or didn't care enough or whatever the case may be. Maybe it's 100% on the players, but it wasn't good enough. And for me, just based on that alone, it's like, all right, well, if that is an issue and that's on coaching, well, if they end up with a different defensive backs coach, I'm not like shattered by it. So I'm not going to be upset if I see Jerry Gray back. I do think he ultimately is a good defensive mind, a good defensive coach, but just based on some of the secondary play that I saw a season ago, I'm not going to be like heartbroken. Let's just put it that way. So ultimately we'll see what happens, and great job by Rob Demovsky reporting that. Meanwhile, we get another Aaron Rodgers update. A few more breadcrumbs. Ian Rappaport says if the Packers get the right package, they could do a deal for Aaron Rodgers. Adam Schefter was once again talking about it on ESPN on SportsCenter as well. So I don't know. Today's topic's not about Aaron Rodgers, so we're not going to dig into that rabbit hole today. It's just it's more breadcrumbs, right? It's now, maybe like after Schefter tweeted it, maybe Rappaport comes out and says, I don't think so. From what I'm hearing, Green Bay is very interested in keeping Aaron this year and is not interested in hearing offers. That's not what we heard. This is, for the right deal, they might be open for business on Aaron. So, and how will that sit with Aaron? Like, it's all very interesting. And just like you have the initial post-season meetings, and then Rodgers on McAfee with a few breadcrumbs, and then Schefter with a few breadcrumbs, and then Ian Rappaport with a few breadcrumbs. And you start reading the signs a little bit, and you start getting the feeling that maybe both of these sides are somewhat interested in actually doing business with a trade and getting Aaron to another team. I'm not there quite yet. I think it's a toss-up. I really do. I still probably lean a little bit towards Aaron being back in Green Bay, but absolutely nothing would surprise me. But that is not our topic for today. Our topic for today is Green Bay and specifically their practice habits and why they need to develop better practice habits or figure out something different to put a better brand of football out on the field. Couple things. First of all, really why I'm talking about this is you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, you look at the San Francisco 49ers, and you look at some of these teams flying around defensively, strong tackling fundamentals, blocking like just unbelievably. Even the Bengals, who are basically playing with a full backup offensive line at this point, completely went out and manhandled a really good Bills defense. And like you see coaching come through. I beg you, watch the blocking and the tackling for Eagles 49ers. This is going to be an awesome matchup of power styles. Two teams that do things the right way. Just go and watch those teams this weekend with a high attention to detail and tell me what they do well, because it's the fundamentals. It's the little things. So I see teams like that are doing those things at such a high level. And I start looking at, all right, why is Green Bay not at that level? Why is this team not a sound tackling team? Why are they not flying around to the football? Why are they not blocking well? It comes down to me to finding a way to build better practice habits. Now, a couple caveats here. I will be fully transparent. During the regular season, I am not at practices, and I have the ability to. I am credentialed. A couple reasons why. A, I have a day job, which gets in the way usually. B, more importantly, is when you go during the regular season to practice, you can see like the first like 10 minutes of warm-ups and individual drills, which is basically like AJ Dillon jogging down the sideline, or like it's either like AJ Dillon and the running backs just kind of running the gauntlet and like doing little things here or there, maybe like little lofted passes from Rodgers to a running back that's not going full speed. And then that's it. You don't get to see any of the actual practice of what they're doing. Like they kick the entire media out at that point. Really, the only thing that you can glean at those practices when you're there is who's healthy and who's not practicing. And for somebody who has to pick and choose my battles of what I can actually attend and what I don't attend, I can learn everything from Bill Huber's tweet or Matt Schneidman's tweet immediately following practice of who practiced and who didn't. In like, instead of driving all the way to the stadium, attending 15 minutes of practice that I'm not going to learn anything from, and then driving all the way back. It just is a matter of time. So I'm just trying to be as smart as possible with what I have available to me. That's why I don't attend. But even if I did, I wouldn't be able to glean Green Bay's practice habits or what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So I want to be fully transparent about that though. And the other thing that I want to say, but I do see them in training camp, obviously, and mini camps, OTAs, those are all open and we can see all of those. So I do see those. The other thing is that what we're going to discuss today, there is an extremely fine balance because you have on one side practice habits and going all out in practice and figuring out a way to really hone your skills. And on the other side, a lot of times is wearing out your players, having the higher potential for more soft tissue injuries and just more injuries in general, players being worn down or not as healthy at the end of the year when you need them most. So there is an extremely delicate balance that you have to figure out. And overall, I will tell you, for good teams, I do err on the side of wanting to be a little bit more careful and having your best players be healthy at the right time. I do think that that is important, but you have to somehow find a really strong balance and strike that balance perfectly, or you're going to end up with a team that's not like well practiced, but all of their guys are out injured, or they're going to all be healthy, but they haven't had the practice reps that they need to actually be playing at a high level at the end of the season. So finding that delicate balance is extremely hard to do. And I'm not going to pretend like I have a perfect silver arrow, perfect solution that's going to solve all of that today. But going back to what I said about the playoff teams, what have been Green Bay's biggest issues, right? Blocking, tackling, communication, taking right angles to the football, and just overall fundamentals. That's what Green Bay's biggest issue has been. To me, I don't think there's a lack of talent on this team. I don't think there's a lack of athleticism. I don't think there's a lack of speed. I think Matt LaFleur, and I think his offense works. Now, the whole Rodgers, LaFleur, what offense are we running? That's a story for another day. But when I look at the things that really got Green Bay into trouble this season, it was the fundamentals. And people always made fun of Mike McCarthy because after every loss, it was like, hey, we got to go back to the fundamentals. We got to block better, pad level, like all the famous Mike McCarthyisms. But he was right. When things don't go well, you have to get back to doing the little things right. At the end of the day, football is tackling and blocking and executing in the trenches, getting off of blocks, and it's just fundamental stuff. That's not a 4.340. That is not, how high somebody jumped in the high jump or the long jump or any of it, right? That's not athletic traits. That is just pure want to and dedication to your craft. And to me, that is where Green Bay has lacked. And those are just things that need to get repped over and over and over so that ultimately you become an expert at them and they become second nature and you're just doing it on every single snap without even knowing it. And to me, I haven't seen that enough. I haven't seen growth from this team. In fact, I think if you look from the time Matt LaFleur took over until now, we've seen a decrease in the fundamentals, a decrease in the blocking, a decrease in the tackling, a decrease in the communication, in like just the like how you're executing on offense. Not skill, not talent, but like people being on the same page, understanding the hand signals, all of those little things that take time and take reps. And this is a draft and develop franchise. If you're going to go out and draft high-end prospects that maybe aren't finished products yet, you need to even put more time into the fundamentals and make sure that these players know exactly what they are doing on a down in and down out basis. And again, if we look at the finished product out on the field on Sundays or Mondays or Thursdays, etc., we just haven't seen that enough, if we're being totally honest. Now, I know coaches will complain about the CBA. They'll say there's less time to work with players and you have to make the most of it and things like that. That's all true. The CBA has made things more challenging. But that makes it all the more important that when you do have practice time, that you are getting absolutely everything that you can out of it. And I'll say it one more time. I get there is a very delicate balance here. And I get that some guys need rest and you don't want to overwork players. And there's all of that goes into it. But some of the things that we've seen, and I'll just say this ahead of time, and all the things I'm listing here, some are not Green Bay's fault, and some, like on a line-by-line basis, I agree with almost all of these to some extent, but let's just go through them. So we've seen a lot of veteran rest days from Matt LaFleur and his coaching staff. We've seen, and this isn't Matt LaFleur's fault, but we've seen more players who have not shown up to OTAs. It's not mandatory. That's understandable. But when you have players like Aaron Rodgers and some other key players that aren't showing up to OTAs, that affects the amount of overall practice time that you get through the course of a year. There's less preseason games overall because they nuked a preseason game in order to get an extra regular season game. But even more so than that, Green Bay has not played their players in the preseason, which takes away reps from players that are eventually going to be playing throughout the course of the year. We've seen Matt LaFleur have a lot of mental practice days. So instead of going all out, it's basically at a jogging pace at best or a walking pace, and it's more of like mental reps. And Matt LaFleur talks about those all the time of, we're not going to do a full practice today. Today's going to be a mental day from the head up. And those are reps that you're not going through tackling. You're not going through like all of the fundamentals that you would normally go through in a given practice. You also have to remember there was a COVID year that wiped out the entirety of an offseason program, which lost you reps for certain players. You have had a lot of shortened or lightened practices. You've had family night that's gone from something where you would actually see more like an actual, almost like game-like atmosphere to just more practice stuff, right? And then you have not seen, we saw some in 2020 during the COVID year where they actually did some live tackling, but you're not seeing any live tackling. And again, I'll say this, some of those not Green Bay's fault, the mandatory mini camps and the COVID year and things like that, but veteran rest days makes sense, right? Maybe not playing players in the preseason so that they don't get hurt and aren't having torn ACLs and out for the year in a meaningless game. I get that, makes sense. Making sure that players are rested and not overworked through the course of the season. That makes sense. Not doing live tackling in practice so you're not hurting your own players. Some of that, all of those individually make sense. But when you add up all of that over the course of 4 seasons under Matt LaFleur, what you get is a lot of lost time and opportunity to work on the things that are really, truly massively important. Tackling, blocking, taking the right angle to the football, rallying to the football, communicating on the back end, making sure everyone knows the hand signals and is on the right page with route running so that Rodgers and the receivers are all at the same point at the same time. All of those things. It's not the skill. It's not the talent. It's going out and it's like the execution. It's the fundamentals of football that we have seen decrease over the last 4 years. I don't think there's any way to argue it any different. So to me, this is now the time where Matt LaFleur and this coaching staff has to look at it and say, all right, how do we get back? How do we get back to being a team that can be physical, attacking up front, and just being a blocking juggernaut like you see some of these 49ers and Eagles teams? Talent is part of that. Having a Trent Williams and Kelsey and Lane Johnson and some of those guys for the 49ers and Eagles, that certainly helps with some of that, but it's not all of it. Some of it just comes down, listen, Josh Myers, an incredibly talented player, is just not there from a technical standpoint. John Runyon Jr., a little bit up and down when it comes to his technical skills. There is a lot of work that those guys can do. On the tackling side of things, we know the issues that this team has had tackling. That's stuff that you have to work on more in order for it to come and be something that you can count on when the games matter most. If you're comparing how this team performs fundamentally compared to these 49ers and Eagles teams, you better be completely out talent them because they are going to out fundamental you. And even if you have more talent, as we have seen with the Packers in other playoff series over the last decade plus, Sometimes you have more talent, but the other team is more fundamentally sound than you and they win the game. And that's happened to Green Bay a lot. So Green Bay's going to have to find a way to get back to the basics. They're going to have to be better at fundamentals. And listen, I think Matt LaFleur is very innovative with the way that he coaches, and I'm hopeful that he can get this turned around. But I do think some things that are going to have to change in order for Green Bay to get back to the point that they need to be super successful on both sides of the ball. And that goes for special teams as well. So again, I don't have a perfect answer for you. I can't say, well, they just have to play all their guys in the preseason. I don't think that's a good idea. Oh, they have to do live tackling in practice. I don't think that's a good idea. But they have to find a way to get back to doing the things that are elementary for football players, but they have to do them at A+ level if they really want to match up with some of these really sound, really good football teams that are competing in the championship games this weekend. That's going to do it for me today. Appreciate you listening as always. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all-new episode. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.